I opened the door softly, my heart pounding. As I stepped outside, the cold night air enveloped me, but I didn't dare stop. That I'm Rebecca Lawson, an accountant living in Chicago, Illinois. At 29, I have a solid career, but my personal life is a burden I've never been able to escape. I'm the sole provider for my family, my mother, Margaret, and my sister, Melissa. My mother retired early for health reasons, but she only works part-time, half-heartedly. And Melissa? She always says she's looking for work, but I've never seen her put in the effort. Every month, I shoulder all the expenses, rent, utilities, groceries, while my mother and sister spend my money irresponsibly. Melissa has a penchant for online shopping without thinking about the consequences, and my mother frequently treats herself to lavish meals, arguing that she's worked all her life and deserves to indulge. I know it's unfair, but I've never objected. They were my family. I had told myself that for years. That evening, as usual, I returned home late after a long day at the office. The apartment was silent except for the sound of the television in the living room. My mother lay on the couch, lazily watching something, while Melissa was busy scrolling through her phone. No one cared how hard I had worked. I just sighed, put down my bag, and walked into the kitchen, where a cold meal was already in the refrigerator. They didn't even wait for me to eat. Little did I know that, in this very house, a terrible plot was being planned, a plan that could cost me my life. I threw my bag down on the couch and opened the refrigerator, where my mom had left the cold food from dinner. As I heated up the plate in the microwave, my mind was flooded with numbers, bills, and a dwindling bank account. I had spent more than I had planned this month, partly because of Melissa's reckless shopping, partly because my mom had asked me to pay for more medicine she never even used. I sat down at the kitchen table, pushing food around my plate without much of an appetite. The bills are higher than usual this month, I said, trying to keep my voice even. My mom just shrugged. That's normal as you get older. I may have overspent a little. Just a little, Melissa interjected without looking up from her phone. I bought a few things, but I'll cut back next month. I clenched my teeth, trying to contain the anger boiling inside me. I wanted to scream, to demand more responsibility from them, but the words stuck in my throat. After all, they were my family. I couldn't turn my back on them, could I? The next morning, as I was sorting through paperwork in my office, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I briefly thought it was a client, so I quickly picked up. Are you Rebecca Lawson? A polite male voice answered. I'm calling from New Horizon Insurance to confirm that your recent beneficiary change has been processed. I paused, my heart pounding. Beneficiary change. I repeated, a chill running down my spine. Yes, the man continued. Last month, we received a request to change your beneficiaries to Margaret Lawson and Melissa Lawson. Your signature is on file, but we just wanted to confirm. My breath caught. My signature. I'd never signed anything like that. There had to be some mistake. I tried to stay calm. I never asked for that, I said, my voice cracking. I need to review this file. I ended the call, my mind reeling. The numbers on the financial statements suddenly made no sense. My hands shook as I opened my computer and logged into my insurance account. Sure enough, the information had been changed. My mother and sister had become my primary beneficiaries if anything happened to me. They had forged my signature. I tried to convince myself that this was probably just a misunderstanding. But then scary thoughts began to creep into my head. Was this intentional? Were they planning something? I remembered the recent times I'd felt unwell after dinner, the sudden bouts of dizziness, the mysterious stomach aches. I also remembered the 2 times my carbon monoxide alarm had gone off for no apparent reason. And most importantly, I remembered the strange brake failure in my car last month. Was it my imagination, or were all these events coming together? I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe that my mother and sister, my family, could hurt me. But then, a small voice spoke in the back of my mind, full of worry and panic. What if it's true? I sat frozen in my chair, a sense of shock taking over my entire body. They had forged my signature. They had deliberately changed my insurance information. And now the dizziness, the car breakdowns, the gas alarms, none of it was a coincidence anymore. A terrifying thought crept into my mind. They were planning to kill me. I wanted to believe that I was wrong. I wanted to believe that my mother and sister could never do that to me. But I couldn't ignore the evidence before me. The words flashing on the screen screamed the truth I didn't want to face. I needed to check. I had to be sure. That night, I got home earlier than usual. Everything around me felt different. The apartment suddenly seemed too quiet, too stuffy. I tried to act normal, said hello to my mother and sister as usual, and walked into Melissa's room, a place I rarely went. My heart pounded as I knelt down, reaching under the bed. My fingers touched something, a cold metal surface. I pulled it out. It was an old laptop. I swallowed, my hands shaking as I opened it. Surprisingly, there was no password. As if it had been waiting for me. The screen lit up, a chat window open. I scrolled down unconsciously, and my heart stopped. How much should we put on Rebecca's insurance? If we increase it over time, no one will suspect anything. I blinked, hoping I had read it wrong. But then the next message appeared, even more terrifying. Until then, just keep using her money like an ATM. My stomach clenched. My fingers went numb as I continued to scroll. She changed her bank password, but it's okay, I got my access back. Everything's almost perfect. Every emotion inside me seemed to shatter. I could no longer deny it. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to get rid of me. I took a shaky breath and continued reading. The message was from 3 weeks ago. If we slowly poison her, the doctors will think it's an underlying disease. The nights I felt dizzy. The meals that made me nauseous. They've tried to kill me before. A chill ran down my spine. My hand dropped to my side, the phone almost falling from my hand. Fear gripped me, forcing my breathing to become rapid. I was living with 2 people who would kill me for money. I couldn't stay here anymore. Just then, the front door opened. I jumped, quickly turning off the monitor and shoving the computer back into its place. Rebecca. My mother's voice echoed from the hallway. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I'm in Melissa's room, just cleaning up a little. The door opened slightly, revealing my mother's face. Oh, that's good. But Melissa should do it herself. I tried to smile, but my face wouldn't cooperate. My mother stared at me, her eyes narrowing. Are you okay? You look pale. I clenched my hands to keep them from shaking. Just tired. I'm going to go to my room and rest. My mother nodded, her voice softer than ever. You should get some rest. But the voice no longer made me feel warm. It made me feel terrified. I walked into my bedroom and locked the door. When it closed behind me, I fell to my knees, hugging my knees. My thoughts swirled in my head, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. I sat against the bedroom door, my knees drawn up, my body shaking with shock. They, my mother and my sister, were really trying to kill me. And if I didn't act now, I might not get another chance. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think clearly. I couldn't let them suspect anything. I had to act like nothing had happened, like I didn't know the horrible truth I'd just discovered. If they realized I suspected them, I wouldn't have a chance to escape. That night, I sat at the dinner table as usual, though every muscle in my body was tense. I pushed the food around on my plate, not daring to touch it. If what I'd read was true, and I was sure it was, then anything in this meal could be poison. My mother glanced at me. Aren't you going to eat? I tried to smile, though the dread in my chest tightened. I have a little headache. I think I've been working too hard. I'll be fine just resting. Her eyes narrowed, studying me. For a moment, I felt like she was assessing me, searching for some sign that I knew something. I kept my breathing slow, keeping my face as calm as possible. Finally, she nodded. Good, you should rest, she said, her voice eerily gentle. When I finally heard their door close, I sprang into action. I rummaged carefully through the closet, pulling out a small bag. I stuffed it with the essentials: wallet, cash, enough clothes for a few days, and most importantly, my phone. But I couldn't bring my main phone. They could track it. I needed a new one. I opened the door carefully, listening. There was no sound except the hum of the television from the living room. As soft as a shadow, I stepped outside, heading straight for the front door. But then I stopped. If I disappeared suddenly, they would immediately become suspicious. I needed to distract them, to give them more time before they realized I was gone. I quickly wrote a note. Leaving early for work due to an emergency. Will be back tonight. A perfect lie. One day might be all I needed to leave this place forever. I opened the door quietly, my heart pounding. As I stepped outside, the cold night air enveloped me, but I didn't dare stop. I walked quickly to the nearest ATM, withdrew as much cash as I could. Then I bought a prepaid phone from a convenience store. No one could track me anymore. The next stop was a bank on the other side of town. I withdrew more money, pursed my lips as the teller eyed me suspiciously. Moving, I muttered as an excuse, and quickly left. Finally, I found the bus stop. The woman at the ticket counter looked at me boredly. One way or round trip? One way to Madison, Wisconsin. I sat rigidly on the bus stop bench, my fingers gripping the strap of my bag until my knuckles turned white. The night air was chilly, but I didn't dare take my eyes off the station entrance. If they found out I'd escaped, they'd come looking for me. I knew that. And if they caught me before I got on the bus, I wasn't sure I'd get a second chance. My new prepaid phone was heavy in my pocket. I hadn't turned it on yet, didn't dare contact anyone. I had only one goal: to get out of Chicago as quickly as possible. The announcement blared from the station's ceiling: the bus to Madison, Wisconsin, leaves in 15 minutes. I let out a soft breath, but I couldn't relax. The seconds dragged on like hours. I looked around, my heart pounding as a man walked into the station, looking familiar. My throat was dry. Was it a stranger, or... No. Not them. I tried to force myself to calm down. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I looked at my old phone, the screen still showing a series of unread messages from my mom and Melissa. I didn't want to read them, but my eyes unconsciously scanned their contents. I thought you were going to work early. The company said you weren't coming. Where are you? Where are you? Rebecca, call me right now. Don't be stupid. The next message almost made me drop my phone. Mom, you know, Melissa. We can't let her get away. If she finds out, we have to act now. The world seemed to collapse around me. I took a sharp breath, a chill running down my spine. They knew. They knew I had run away. My heart was pounding. Did I have time? Could I make it to the bus? I stood up, hastily stuffing my phone into my pocket. I tried not to draw attention, but my every step seemed to echo in the silence of the station. I walked quickly to the boarding area. There was a line of people, and I rushed into the middle of them, trying to make myself small. Every time the station doors opened, I flinched, imagining my mother or sister rushing in, looking for me. When I finally got on the bus, I held my breath until the driver closed the door. The bus started, slowly pulling out of the station. I didn't dare look back, but I could imagine them appearing, entering the station, looking around. But I was gone. I was gone. At least for now. But fear still clung to me like a shadow. I sat huddled in the bus seat, clutching the straps of my bag, my eyes glued to the window but not really looking out. Chicago receded behind me, the streetlights fading into the night, but I didn't dare relax. Mom and Melissa knew I'd run away. Mom's last text message echoed in my head, "We can't let him get away." I tried not to imagine what they would do next, but panic gnawed at my mind. If they were bold enough to forge my signature, cruel enough to poison me for months, who was to say they wouldn't find a way to hunt me down? I shuddered. They could call the police. They could pretend to be grieving relatives and say I was missing, that I was mentally unstable. If the police believed them, they could find me before I could tell them the truth. I had to stay ahead of the curve. As the bus entered the suburbs, I pulled out my old phone and put the battery in it one last time. I needed a way to keep them busy, to confuse them long enough to buy me some time. I opened my texting app and typed a message to my mom. "I know everything." Then I turned it off immediately, took out the battery, and threw the phone in the trash bag next to my seat. They would read the message. They would panic. And most importantly, they would never be able to track my phone. I closed my eyes, but my body was still tense with anxiety. I told myself I was safe, that they couldn't find me right now, but the fear wouldn't leave. Finally, after hours of tension, the bus arrived in Madison, Wisconsin. When I got off the bus, I immediately felt the difference. No more towering buildings, no more familiar city noise. The morning air was chilly, the scent of damp grass and fresh earth filling my nostrils. I pulled up my collar, tightened my purse, and hurried out of the bus stop. I couldn't stand standing there for long. I pulled out my new phone, my hands still shaking as I searched for my grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore's address. I hadn't seen her in almost a decade. I didn't know if she would recognize me or if she would let me in. But I had nowhere else to go. I hailed a cab, my heart pounding as the car slowly turned into a quiet residential area. Small houses were scattered among rows of maple trees, their red and orange leaves signaling the approach of fall. When I finally saw the familiar white house with the porch, my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. The car stopped, and I took a deep breath and stepped outside. I walked toward the front door, my hands shaking as I rang the bell. The seconds of silence stretched like a century. Then the door opened. An elderly woman with silver hair stood there, her piercing blue eyes fixed on my face. I swallowed, my voice trembling slightly. "Grandma, it's you, Rebecca." Eleanor blinked, her breath catching. I was afraid she wouldn't recognize me, that she would close the door. But then tears welled up in her eyes. "Rebecca. Oh, my love." She opened her arms, and I fell into them, sobbing. For the first time in days, I felt safe. I buried my face in my grandmother's warm embrace, the tears I had been holding back for so long finally spilling over. In that moment, I was no longer Rebecca Lawson, the strong woman who had run away from her loved ones, but a child who needed protection. Eleanor rubbed my back gently, whispering comfort, but I knew that this peace was only temporary. I had escaped my mother and Melissa, but they were still out there. And I knew they wouldn't let me go easily. After calming down, I told her everything. At first, I was hesitant. Would she believe me? Would she think I was delusional? But when I got to the part about finding the messages on Melissa's computer, her face turned pale. She grabbed my hand and squeezed it tightly. "We need to call the police, Rebecca." I nodded. It was the only thing I could do. With her help, I found a local law firm, where she had a longtime friend, Daniel Carter. He was no longer in practice, but he had enough experience to guide me. When I showed him the screenshots and evidence from Melissa's computer, Daniel paused for a long moment. Finally, he said, "We have a case. I'm going to call the police." The next day, I sat down with Madison Police Detective Sarah Mitchell and told her the whole story. She listened carefully, took careful notes, and promised to work with the Chicago police to open an investigation. But even after I had filed a formal report, I still felt uneasy. The feeling was amplified when I checked my new phone. 10 missed calls from unknown numbers. A simple text message from a number that wasn't saved to my contacts. "You think you can get away from us?" I clutched the phone, trying to stay calm. Mom and Melissa knew I had called the police. They were desperate. And that made them more dangerous than ever. I looked up at my grandmother, my heart filled with worry. I had escaped once. But could I really be safe? 3 months later, the trial began. I sat bolt upright, my hands clasped in my lap, trying to stay calm. The air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation and tension. Across from me, my mother, Margaret, and my sister, Melissa, sat silently in their orange prison uniforms. The police had acted quickly after I reported them. They gathered evidence, delving into my mother and sister's financial accounts, finding not only suspicious transactions but also signs of fraudulent insurance policies. Even more alarming, they found traces of thallium in my mother's home, a poison that can cause gradual deterioration, exactly the symptoms I had been experiencing for months. Prosecutor Karen Len stood, her voice clear and sharp as she listed the charges: attempted murder, insurance fraud, financial abuse. I felt a chill run down my spine as the incontrovertible evidence was presented to the jury. At first, my mother remained eerily calm, showing no remorse. She just sat there, occasionally glancing at me with resentful eyes. But Melissa was different. As the trial dragged on, I could see the tension and fear on her face. On the fifth day, when she was called to testify, Melissa broke down. Her voice trembled as she admitted that my mother had planned it, that at first she had thought it was a joke, but as things became more serious, she had not dared to fight back. Everything seemed clear. 2 days later, the verdict was delivered. My mother was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Melissa received 8 years, hoping for a lighter sentence for her cooperation. I sat motionless, listening to every word of the verdict. As my mother was escorted out, she turned to look at me one last time. Her eyes no longer had the gentleness I had known, only hatred. But I'm not afraid anymore. I've taken back my life. And this time, I'll live for myself, not as a puppet in their hands.